The streets of the bustling city pulsed with life as the afternoon sun blazed down, casting long shadows across the sidewalks. Horns honked impatiently, pedestrians hurried past one another, and the world moved forward at its usual unrelenting pace. In the midst of this chaotic rhythm, a sleek black presidential motorcade glided through the avenues, its presence impossible to ignore. The lead vehicle, known as Cadillac One, carried none other than Donald Trump. Inside the fortified limousine, Trump sat with his advisors, engrossed in a policy discussion. The security team remained vigilant, scanning the crowds through tinted windows, ensuring nothing disrupted the pre-planned route. But just as they were about to turn onto a major boulevard, something caught Trump's attention. A sight so simple, yet so profoundly out of place that it made him pause. A small girl, no older than 10, stood on the sidewalk, her fragile figure barely noticeable among the towering masses rushing by. She was dressed in a faded gray hoodie, its fabric thin and worn from time. Her hair, tangled and unkempt, clung to her dirt-smudged cheeks, but it was her eyes, large, strikingly blue, and filled with both fear and hope, that held Trump's gaze. In her small hands she clutched a tattered cardboard sign with a message hastily scrawled in uneven handwriting. "Please help. My family desperately needs a miracle." Trump leaned in, narrowing his eyes at the heartbreaking sight. He was accustomed to seeing protests, banners, and panhandlers along city streets, but this was different. The girl wasn't begging for money. She wasn't making a statement. She was simply standing there, silently pleading for someone, anyone, to notice her. "Stop the car," Trump ordered, his voice cutting through the conversation in the vehicle. The entire motorcade came to a screeching halt. The sudden pause sent a ripple of confusion through his security detail and aides, who exchanged puzzled glances. "Sir, this area isn't secure," one of the agents spoke cautiously. "We need to keep moving." Trump didn't even glance at him. His eyes remained locked on the child standing alone on the street. "I want to know that girl's story," he said firmly. A tense silence filled the car. It was rare, almost unheard of, for a sitting president to abandon the safety of his motorcade, especially in an uncontrolled public setting. But Trump had already made his decision. Before his advisors could protest further, he reached for the door handle and stepped out onto the pavement. Almost instantly, murmurs spread through the crowd. People pulled out their phones, eager to capture the unexpected moment as the President of the United States, surrounded by armed security, strode toward a homeless child. Kneeling down to meet her eye level, Trump softened his voice. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The girl hesitated, gripping her sign tighter. Lily," she stammered. "And why are you standing here, Lily?" Her lips trembled, and for a moment she seemed unsure whether to speak. Then, gathering her courage, she whispered, "Because my mom is sick, and we don't have a home anymore." The world around them seemed to blur as Trump absorbed those words. In that instant, he knew. This wasn't just about one little girl. This was about something much bigger. The streets were alive with the relentless pace of the city. Cars honking, hurried footsteps echoing off buildings, and people moving past one another, too engrossed in their own lives to notice a small figure standing alone on the sidewalk. But one man did notice. From the back seat of Cadillac One, the official presidential limousine, Donald Trump's gaze locked onto a frail girl clutching a worn-out cardboard sign. Her message was short but powerful. "Please help. My family desperately needs a miracle." Trump's expression tightened. The little girl, no older than 10, had wide, strikingly blue eyes filled with quiet desperation. She was dressed in an oversized hoodie, the fabric thin and tattered. Strands of tangled hair framed her dirt-smudged face, and her tiny hands clutched the sign as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the world. Without hesitation, Trump issued a command that sent shockwaves through his team. "Stop the car." The entire motorcade came to a sudden halt, causing confusion among security personnel and advisors. "Sir, we have a strict schedule. This area isn't secure," one of the bodyguards cautioned. But Trump had already made up his mind. Ignoring their concerns, he stepped out of the car and into the crowded sidewalk. Onlookers gasped, quickly pulling out their phones to capture the surreal moment. The President of the United States walking toward a homeless girl, undeterred by protocol or security risks. Kneeling down to meet her eye level, Trump's voice softened. What's your name, sweetheart? The girl flinched slightly, clutching her sign tighter before whispering, Lily. And why are you standing here, Lily? Trump pressed gently. She hesitated, her lips trembling as though she feared the weight of her own words. But then she took a deep breath. Because my mom is really sick, and we don't have a home anymore. My dad, he was a soldier, but he died. Trump's expression shifted. His usual steely gaze softened into something deeper. Concern, understanding, and perhaps even guilt. He had spoken countless times about supporting veterans, ensuring their families were taken care of. Yet here stood the daughter of a fallen soldier, abandoned and left to beg for help on the streets of America. Straightening up, Trump turned to his team with the authority only a president could wield. We're going to see where Lily lives. His security detail stiffened. Sir, that is not advisable, one agent objected. If a child can stand on a busy street to save her mother, then I can risk going to where they live, Trump shot back. If you're afraid, feel free to leave. Silence fell. No one dared argue further. Lily's eyes widened in disbelief. You really want to come? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Trump nodded. Lead the way. The Cadillac One and the rest of the motorcade moved cautiously through the city, but the scenery quickly changed. The shining skyscrapers and bustling storefronts faded into dilapidated buildings, crumbling infrastructure, and streets littered with debris. As they turned into a darkened alley, Lily pointed ahead. That's our home, she murmured. The sight that met Trump's eyes was heartbreaking. A tiny, decaying shack, pieced together from scrap wood and metal, barely standing under its own weight. A rusted tin roof covered the makeshift shelter, riddled with holes. The surrounding area was eerily quiet, save for a few children peeking from behind worn-out doorways, their eyes filled with both curiosity and fear. Stepping out of the car, Trump took in the surroundings before turning back to his advisors. I want a full report on every family here, their needs, their struggles, and I want it on my desk by tomorrow morning. Sir, we should coordinate this through local agencies, one of his aides suggested. Trump shook his head. They've waited long enough. With a determined look, he knelt beside Lily and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. You've done something incredibly brave, Lily. You've been fighting for your mom. Now it's my turn to fight for both of you. As he turned to face the growing crowd of curious residents, his voice rang with conviction. No family, especially the family of someone who sacrificed everything for this country, should be living like this. That ends today. A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. A few claps broke the silence, then more, until the air filled with applause. The people who had long felt abandoned now had hope. For Trump, this wasn't just about helping one little girl. This was about something much bigger. This was about keeping a promise. As Cadillac One rolled to a stop in front of a deteriorating house at the end of a trash-filled alley, the contrast between the two worlds couldn't have been more stark. Just minutes ago, the presidential motorcade had been moving smoothly through the bustling city streets, where high-rise buildings and well-dressed citizens defined the landscape. Now, Donald Trump found himself standing in the middle of one of the city's most forgotten corners, a place where hope seemed as fragile as the crumbling homes surrounding him. Lily clung tightly to Trump's hand as she led him inside her home. The interior was dimly lit with barely any furniture. A single bed, old and sagging, was positioned in the corner. On it lay a frail woman, her face pale and eyes filled with exhaustion. She struggled to sit up as Trump entered, her expression a mixture of disbelief and apprehension. Lily's voice trembled as she introduced them. Mom, this is Mr. Trump. He wants to help us. Trump stepped closer, kneeling beside the woman's bedside. You don't need to say anything, he said softly. Your daughter did something incredible today. She made sure your story was heard. Tears welled in the woman's eyes as she grasped her daughter's thin hand. My husband, Daniel, she began, her voice hoarse. He was a soldier. He gave everything for this country. But when he died, there was nothing left for us. I got sick. I lost my job, and now we have nowhere to go. Trump listened intently, his jaw tightening. He had met countless families of fallen soldiers before, had spoken at memorials, and pledged his support to veterans, but seeing this level of neglect firsthand was something entirely different. He turned sharply to his security team and advisors. I want immediate action. We need a doctor to assess her condition tonight. One of his aides hesitated. Sir, this area isn't secure. We should return to the White House and— No, Trump interrupted, his voice firm. If a child can stand on a busy street to save her mother, then I can stand here long enough to make sure she gets the help she deserves. His words silenced the objections. As Trump stepped back outside, he found that a small crowd had gathered, residents of the neighborhood drawn by the presence of the presidential motorcade. Their faces bore the same weary, hopeless expressions. These were people who had long stopped expecting help from anyone. A middle-aged man, his clothes worn and his face lined with hardship, stepped forward. Mr. Trump, I never thought I'd see the day a president would stand in our neighborhood, he said. We're not just poor, we've been forgotten. Trump looked around, taking in the broken homes, the children with bare feet, and the exhausted mothers watching from their doorways. I see you, he said, his voice filled with conviction, and I promise you, this ends today. Turning to his team, he issued his next order. I want a full report on every family here, their needs, their struggles, and I want it on my desk by tomorrow morning. Sir, coordinating through local agencies would be more practical, an aide suggested. Trump's expression hardened. They've waited long enough. If Lily can fight for her family, then so can we. Applause broke out among the crowd, hesitant at first, then growing louder. The residents, who had spent years feeling invisible, now saw someone standing before them willing to take action. Before leaving, Trump turned back to Lily, kneeling once more to meet her gaze. You did something incredibly brave today, he told her. You didn't just help your mother. You've helped bring change to an entire community, and I won't let you down. With that, Cadillac One rolled away from the slum. But for Trump, this was only the beginning. As his motorcade moved back toward the city, he knew this was no longer about one girl or one family. This was about fixing a broken system, about making sure no veteran's family was ever left behind again. And he wasn't going to stop until that promise was fulfilled. Within days of Trump's unexpected stop in the slums, Lily's story spread like wildfire. The video of him stepping out of Cadillac One, kneeling to speak with a desperate young girl, and promising to help not only her, but an entire forgotten community became an internet sensation. Millions watched the moment unfold, some in disbelief, others in admiration, but all with the realization that something profound had just begun. On social media, the hashtag #HopeForHeroes began trending nationwide. Americans from all walks of life, veterans, single parents, struggling families, shared their own stories of hardship. Comments flooded in. Lily isn't just one little girl. She represents thousands of families left behind. Others asked, how can I help? The outpouring of support wasn't limited to words. Within 48 hours, donations began pouring in, not just from individuals, but from some of America's largest corporations. Amazon, Walmart, and Apple each pledged millions to aid struggling veteran families, and dozens of nonprofit organizations joined forces to provide immediate assistance. But it didn't stop there. Inspired by Trump's actions, local communities took charge. A group of high school students in California organized a fundraiser, collecting school supplies for children of veteran families. In Texas, a teacher donated her entire yearly bonus to assist a widow whose husband had died in service. In Ohio, a retired Marine started volunteering to repair homes for struggling military families in his community. For the first time in years, America wasn't just talking about the struggles of its veterans. It was taking action. Lily and her mother quickly became the faces of the movement. Invited onto national television, they shared their journey with the world. In an emotional interview, Lily's mother fought back tears as she said, I used to believe we'd never have a chance at a normal life again. But now, because of Lily's courage and the kindness of others, I see hope, not just for us, but for families like ours across the country. To mark the movement's progress, Trump announced a Hope for Heroes National Summit, a gathering at the White House dedicated to recognizing the individuals and organizations that had stepped up in the wake of Lily's story. Families of veterans, donors, nonprofit leaders, and volunteers stood together on the White House lawn as Trump addressed them. Lily showed us that even the smallest voices can spark the greatest change. Today we stand here not just to celebrate this movement, but to commit to something greater, ensuring that no veteran's family is ever forgotten again. As Lily and her mother stood beside him, the audience erupted into applause. But beyond the celebration, something more powerful had taken root. A nationwide commitment to honor those who had served by ensuring their families never had to fight alone. The Hope for Heroes initiative wasn't just a moment, it was a movement, one that was only just beginning. As weeks turned into months, the Hope for Heroes initiative grew beyond what anyone could have imagined. What started with a single moment, Trump stopping his motorcade for a little girl, had now turned into a nationwide movement dedicated to helping veteran families who had been left behind. The story of Lily and her mother was no longer just their own. It had become a symbol of resilience, courage, and the collective power of people coming together for a cause greater than themselves. Major corporations such as Amazon, Walmart, and Apple pledged multi-million-dollar donations, helping fund critical programs to support veteran families. But it wasn't just corporate America stepping up. Ordinary citizens, local organizations, and small businesses also played a crucial role. Across the country, communities banded together to raise funds, provide housing, and ensure that families like Lily's would never again be forgotten. One of the most remarkable aspects of the movement was the overwhelming support from everyday Americans. A teacher in Texas donated her yearly bonus to help cover rent for a struggling military widow. In Ohio, a retired Marine started repairing homes for veterans in need. High school students in California organized donation drives, collecting school supplies for children of veteran families. The movement had ignited a spirit of unity that had been missing for far too long. With the surge of nationwide support, Trump and his team worked quickly to expand the reach of Hope for Heroes. He personally oversaw the creation of veteran assistance centers in cities across the country, ensuring that no family would have to endure what Lily's had. These centers provided job placement programs, mental health support, and emergency financial aid for those in crisis. Within 6 months, thousands of families had already received direct assistance, with countless more on the waiting list. The impact of Hope for Heroes extended beyond just helping individual families. It transformed public policy. Inspired by the movement, lawmakers introduced new legislation aimed at providing long-term financial and healthcare support for veteran families. What had started as a grassroots effort had now reached the highest levels of government, sparking a national conversation about the responsibilities owed to those who had sacrificed everything for their country. Lily and her mother, once on the brink of despair, now stood as symbols of change. They were invited to speak at the White House, sharing their journey with the nation. Standing on stage, Lily's voice trembled, but her message was powerful. "I never thought one sign could change my life, but today I know that when we speak up, when we believe, we can change the lives of many." The audience rose to their feet, tears in their eyes, applauding not just for Lily, but for the thousands of families her story had helped. Trump's simple act of stopping his car for a little girl had ignited something much greater than a moment. It had sparked a movement. A movement that reminded the nation of its duty to those who had given everything. And most importantly, a movement that was just getting started. Months after the Hope for Heroes initiative began, its impact was felt across the country. What started with one child's plea had grown into a nationwide movement, touching the lives of thousands of forgotten veteran families. To honor those who had sacrificed everything for their country, President Trump announced the creation of a national memorial at the National Mall, a symbol of gratitude and remembrance. On a bright, sunny morning, thousands gathered at the heart of Washington, D.C. for the unveiling ceremony. Veterans, military families, government officials, and everyday Americans stood together, united by a cause that had reignited a sense of duty and compassion. The anticipation was palpable as cameras flashed and murmurs spread through the crowd. The moment had arrived. The memorial, standing tall and resolute, depicted a bronze statue of a kneeling soldier holding the hand of his young daughter, a striking representation of sacrifice and the unbreakable bond of family. The inscription at the base read, "They gave everything, and now we must ensure they are never forgotten." As Trump stepped to the podium, the crowd fell silent. His voice carried across the National Mall, firm yet filled with emotion. Today we do more than unveil a monument. We engrave a promise that those who have given their lives for this nation will never be left behind. Their families will never be abandoned. And we, as a country, will stand by them, just as they stood for us. The applause that followed was thunderous, rippling through the crowd like a wave of shared conviction. Many wiped away tears, moved by the solemnity of the moment. Among them stood Lily and her mother, now no longer struggling for survival, but serving as symbols of hope and resilience. Lily, dressed in a simple white dress, hesitated before stepping forward to speak. Taking a deep breath, she faced the sea of people, her small but determined voice carrying through the air. I never thought that holding a cardboard sign would change my life. I just wanted to save my mom. But now, I know that when we have the courage to ask for help, we don't just change our own lives, we can change the lives of many. The crowd erupted into a standing ovation. Journalists captured the moment, headlines already forming in their minds. A child's plea sparks a national movement, and hope for heroes becomes a lasting legacy. As the ceremony concluded, people lined up to place flowers at the base of the statue, honoring the sacrifices of countless soldiers and their families. Inspired by the movement, states across the country announced new veteran support programs, ensuring that this was not just a symbolic gesture, but a step toward real, lasting change. As Trump walked away from the stage, he looked back at the statue, the image of the kneeling soldier now etched into the nation's memory. This was more than a memorial. It was a testament to the power of one small act, one child's voice, and the unwavering commitment of a country that refused to forget its heroes. Lily's story did not end with the memorial's unveiling. What began as a desperate plea from a young girl on a busy street had transformed into a movement that reached far beyond Washington, D.C. The Hope for Heroes initiative continued to grow, inspiring people across the country to step up and support veteran families who had long been forgotten. In the weeks following the dedication ceremony, donations poured in from all corners of the nation. Corporations pledged millions, small businesses organized fundraisers, and individuals contributed whatever they could. A single mother in Texas, who had once relied on food stamps, sent $5 along with a handwritten letter. I don't have much, but I know what it feels like to struggle. I want to help, even if it's just a little. The movement had reignited a spirit of generosity that many thought had faded in modern America. Across the country, veteran families received the support they desperately needed. The funds helped cover housing costs, medical expenses, and job training programs. Schools partnered with Hope for Heroes to provide scholarships for children of fallen soldiers, ensuring they would not be denied the future their parents had fought to protect. One of the most touching stories came from a high school football team in Ohio that had watched Lily's story unfold on the news. Moved by her courage, they rallied their community to renovate the home of a local veteran who had been struggling to keep his house from falling apart. Within weeks, they had replaced his roof, repaired his plumbing, and ensured he would have a warm place to sleep at night. The veteran, a former Marine named Tom, wept as he thanked them. For years, I felt invisible, he said. But today, I know I'm not alone. The initiative didn't just change lives, it changed the way people saw their role in society. It reminded them that one act of kindness can set off a ripple effect, touching lives in ways we may never fully see. It wasn't just about President Trump's actions that day. It was about a little girl who refused to give up, a nation that listened, and a movement that proved helping one person can lead to helping thousands. Lily and her mother continued to be symbols of hope. They appeared at events, not as celebrities, but as reminders of what was possible when people chose to care. In a television interview, Lily's mother reflected on how much had changed since that fateful day. I used to believe no one saw us, that we were just another statistic. But now I know that people do care. My daughter had the courage to ask for help, and because of that, we weren't just saved, we were given a new purpose. As the movement continued, Lily's story became more than just a viral moment. It became a testament to the power of compassion, proving that even in a world filled with division, there are still those willing to stand up and make a difference. As the Hope for Heroes initiative continued to gain momentum, it became clear that what started as a single act of kindness had evolved into a nationwide movement. No longer just a story about Lily and her mother, it had become a rallying cry for all forgotten veteran families struggling to rebuild their lives. In cities and small towns across America, people began stepping forward, eager to be part of something greater. Community groups organized food drives for veteran families, while local businesses pledged to provide jobs for unemployed veterans. Churches, schools, and charities joined forces to raise funds for housing projects that would give struggling families a stable place to live. Even those who had never served in the military felt compelled to help, understanding that supporting veterans was not just about politics. It was about honoring those who had given everything for their country. One of the most impactful changes came from the corporate world, where major companies recognized the need to invest in veteran support programs. Walmart announced a multi-million-dollar donation to Hope for Heroes, while Amazon pledged to fund job training programs for veterans re-entering the workforce. Starbucks committed to hiring thousands of veterans and their spouses, proving that businesses could be part of the solution. But perhaps the most touching moments came from ordinary Americans whose generosity and compassion made the movement truly special. A retired firefighter in Florida donated his pension bonus to help a homeless veteran find housing. A group of middle school students in California started a campaign to write letters of gratitude to military families, sending thousands of heartfelt messages across the nation. One letter read, "Your sacrifice means more than words can say. You are not forgotten." Meanwhile, Lily's life had transformed completely. No longer the little girl standing alone on a street corner, she had become an advocate for those who felt invisible. She and her mother were invited to the White House to share their story, their voices now representing thousands of families who had once suffered in silence. Standing before a crowd of supporters, Lily spoke with the same quiet determination that caught Trump's attention that day. "I was just trying to help my mom," she said. "But now, I see that so many people needed help too. If we all do something, no matter how small, we can change lives. We can change the world." The Hope for Heroes movement didn't just provide aid. It sparked a national conversation about how America treats those who serve. It forced lawmakers to confront the realities of veteran homelessness and inadequate medical care. Policies were rewritten, budgets were reallocated, and the American people demanded more from their leaders. What had begun as one little girl's plea for help had become a revolution of compassion, proving that when people come together for a just cause, miracles can happen. And as the nation watched Hope for Heroes grow, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a moment in history. It was the start of something far greater. Months after the Hope for Heroes initiative was launched, its impact continued to ripple across the nation. What had started as a moment of compassion from a single child had transformed into a national movement. No longer just an effort to help one struggling family, it had become a commitment to honoring and uplifting all veteran families who had been forgotten. One of the most powerful symbols of this transformation was the dedication of a new national memorial in Washington, D.C. The memorial, located at the National Mall, was unlike any other. At its center stood a towering bronze statue, a soldier kneeling down, holding the hand of his young daughter. It represented not only the sacrifices made by those who served, but also the struggles their families endured long after the battles had ended. Engraved on the base of the statue were the words, "They gave everything. Now we must ensure they are never forgotten." At the dedication ceremony, veterans, military families, and civilians from all over the country gathered to witness the unveiling. Many had traveled thousands of miles to be there, knowing that this moment symbolized more than just a new monument. It was a promise that America would never turn its back on those who had sacrificed the most. Donald Trump, standing before the crowd, delivered a speech that captured the heart of the movement. Lily's story reminded us that no family should have to beg for help after sacrificing so much for this country. Today, we are not just unveiling a memorial. We are committing to a future where no veteran, no child, and no family is left behind. He then turned to Lily, now standing confidently beside her mother. The young girl, who had once held a tattered sign on the streets begging for help, was now an inspiration for millions. As she stepped forward to speak, her voice was steady, yet filled with emotion. "I didn't think anyone would stop to help us," she began. "But now, because of this movement, so many families like mine have hope again. And I just want to say, thank you. Thank you for listening, for caring, and for proving that kindness can change the world." As she finished, the audience erupted into applause. Not just for Lily, but for every veteran and every struggling family who now had a brighter future. The impact of Hope for Heroes didn't stop at the memorial. New programs were launched to provide permanent housing for homeless veterans. Medical facilities across the country expanded their support for veteran families, and businesses pledged to hire thousands of former service members. Schools began teaching children about the sacrifices of military families, ensuring that future generations would never forget. What started as a simple act of kindness on a city street had become one of the most defining moments in modern American history. The Hope for Heroes movement was no longer just about helping a single family. It was about changing the way an entire nation honored its bravest. And as the sun set over the memorial that evening, one thing was certain: this was only the beginning. In life, we often witness struggles from afar, people facing hardships, families in need, and communities left behind. We may feel sympathy, but how often do we take action? The Hope for Heroes movement reminds us that a single act of kindness can create a ripple effect far beyond what we imagine. Lily, just a young girl, stood on a busy street holding a sign. She had no wealth, no influence, only a heart full of love for her mother. Yet, her small voice reached someone who chose to listen, and that moment of compassion changed not just her life, but the lives of thousands. It teaches us that helping others doesn't always require grand gestures. Sometimes it starts with simply acknowledging those in need. For older generations, this lesson is even more profound. We've lived long enough to see how the world can sometimes forget those who have given everything. But we also know that our wisdom, our voices, and our actions still matter. Whether by supporting a struggling neighbor, mentoring a younger generation, or standing up for what is right, we can still be a source of hope. No act of kindness is ever too small, because sometimes the smallest actions create the greatest change.